Here is the uncomfortable truth. Google isn't ranking websites anymore, it's ranking ideas. AI search has basically changed how visibility works, and most business owners are still chasing things that no longer matter. Today, I'm going to be sitting down with Mike King, and he's going to show us a lot about how Google's AI actually works, how it decides which brands to feature, and which companies will show up. So the other cool thing is we're going to be demoing live this tool that he has, which I haven't even tried myself yet. So I'm pretty excited to see this. And I think it'll help open some people's eyes to kind of understand what is different about Google's AI than what we're used to with traditional search. Mike, just give yourself a brief intro for people that maybe don't know who you are.
Mike King. No, just kidding. I'm the CEO and founder at iPullRank. We are a digital marketing agency focused on search. And what we do a lot of is AI search.
Yeah. I mean, that's the trendy thing. Now I have to ask, do you call it geo? What's your name for it?
I don't call it anything. I call it whatever the client calls it. And a lot of clients call it GEO, some call it AEO, but I call what we do relevance engineering.
Relevance engineering. Okay, yeah. And nobody can agree on an acronym, which is kind of annoying. So yeah, wasn't sure where you stood on that. What would you say is like the wildest thing that you have seen Google change in like the last year?
Wildest thing. I don't know. I generally think that them going so hard into AI overviews when it's just like a broken product is the wildest thing to me, because they spent 25 years building the trust so that we can trust their results. Now we're kind of back to square one in that you kind of gotta, kind of research whatever the answer is to make sure it's actually right.
Mm-hmm. Are you finding that it's getting better like than it was a year ago, or is it still pretty bad?
Yeah, no, I think it's getting progressively better. But again, you once you like use something and you can't trust it, you always don't trust it. So like,
Mm-hmm.
if I get a response from Gemini or whatever it is, I'm like, all right, cool. Let me look at these citations to make sure this is actually real.
So one of the things I want to dive into is this concept of fan out queries. That's a very fancy word for anybody that doesn't work in SEO. So in plain English, imagine you're talking to a kid who doesn't work in SEO. How would you describe what a fan out query is?
It's like a subquery that happens in the background. So the way it works is whatever the query is or the prompt is that the user puts in, it then extrapolates to a bunch of other queries, and then it uses those to perform searches to then pull components from pages and then feed that to the large language model.
Okay, so I think to visualize this, this is where I'm going to have Mike actually pull up his tool, but I would love to actually use a example from someone in our audience. So what do you need, Mike? A query? Do you need a website or just a query?
Yeah, just a query. Just a query.
Okay, so go ahead, put in the chat like some example, like a keyword, something that you want him to throw in here, because I think it'll be easier to show people kind of how it works. And obviously this tool is something you built, right? Like your company built this tool and it's a free tool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not saying any queries yet.
Okay. So we'll wait for that. I can give you one to start because I've got a couple queued up here. If you want to screen share,
Yep.
And just to clarify, is this tool like what you suggest people use? Are there other tools out there? And is this going to give people like an idea of how Google works, or does it also, theoretically speaking, work for like ChatGPT as well?
So all the different tools do their query fan out a bit differently. And I know there's a lot of tools on the market. Like as an example, Profound will show you the query fan out for Meta AI. They'll also show it for ChatGPT. But my tool is specifically for Google. So yeah, why don't you throw me a query and we can run one.
Yeah, we've got a bunch in the chat here, so I'll use one of these. How about best AC repair company in Tampa? And I assume like you would need to specify the area. You probably couldn't say like near me for this to work, right?
Well, even with near me, it's going to give you some extrapolations, but there's like 9 different query types that are generated, and there are going to be ones that are very personalized or based on the user's history that we can't see because it's of course going to be based on that user, but it's going to generate all the 8 of the other ones. So in this case, yes, you would want to put the location in. So just to give you a sense of like what these options are, you can even either give it a list of queries or just a single query. In this version, we're just going to do the single query, and then you can decide, is it going to be, you know, simple versus complex, because AI overviews don't do as many queries as like AI mode. So basically we're going to ask the model, like, how many queries do we think we need? And then it's going to generate them from there.
Cool. Maybe we should do the same query in both and just see how different it is.
Hold on, let me stop sharing because I need to get my API key again.
All good. Yeah, I haven't really played around with AI mode much. I don't think it's necessarily a big deal yet for the type of businesses that we work with, but who knows, right? Google doesn't tell us how many of the clicks are coming from AI mode, so I could be wrong.
Yeah. Let me share. Yeah, there's that big problem of attribution for sure. All right, so API key in here, and this is a free tool. Anyone can use it. You can just go to that URL, iPullRank.com/tool/Qphoria, and you just need to bring your API key, which you can get from Google AI Studio. They have a free key that you can use as well. And so what it's going to do is basically generate these queries, and we're going to get a list of them. And it's not just going to give you the list of queries. It's also going to tell you why it determined those queries, and it's going to tell you the type of content that's expected. So in this case, it generated 12 queries. And this is the seed query that was used here. And then these are the queries that were generated. So queries like top rated air conditioning repair services, Tampa, how to choose good AC repair company in Tampa, so on and so forth, right? And then you get the type of query. Is it a reformulation query? Is it an implicit question that the user's asking, related questions, so on and so forth. And then for each of these queries, it's saying like, okay, here's the user intent for this query. Like, what are they trying to solve with it? And then this is the reasoning for why the model determined like this is a query it wants to use. And then we have something called routing format. This is the type of content that the model expects for that query. So what Google is doing is they're not just generating the query, they're saying for this query, this is the sort of content that we want. So it's not just purely about rankings, it's also about content format. And then it gives you the reasoning for that content format. So in some cases, you may need a FAQ page. In some cases, just like a raw article. In other cases, it may be like a comparison table or a pricing page. So this should be enough for you to start to figure out like, what does your content strategy need to be in order to align with the expectations of the models that Google is using. You guys want to give me another one?
Yeah, so I have a couple follow-up questions here. So let's say you're this AC repair company. This is your client, right? So you want to rank for the best AC repair company in Tampa. When you are thinking about your content, for all these queries, obviously you want your site to rank for them. But like, are we talking, or how do you make that decision of taking your emergency page, for example, and adding stuff to it? Usually I know in HVAC, emergency pages are usually their own thing, and usually cost pages are also their own thing. But like, how to choose a good AC company repair? Is it a blog post? Is that the same page as the one that you want to rank for best? Like, how do you make that decision?
Yeah, so actually you want to have as many different pages as possible because these systems are looking for diversity. And I don't mean just like diversity of domains. They're looking for multiple sources that they can pull from. So if it makes sense for some of this to go on the same page, then sure, do that, right? Like the average cost of AC repair in Tampa, Florida should also probably be on your pricing page, right? Or you could combine those. But some of these other things you may need to have multiple pages for. And so when the model goes out, it's going to say, okay, what ranks for these different queries? So the idea is that you want to rank as well as you can for all of these subqueries, even though in a lot of these cases, these subqueries may not have any search volume. And that's one of the things I think is tripping up our industry, because they'll say things like, oh, well, why aren't we just using like the people also ask queries, or using queries that we know have search volume? A lot of those synthetic queries don't have any. So that's not really the measure of what you should be going after. And so as far as the content strategy, it's really going to be a function of like what makes sense. But ideally, the more pages you have, the better, because yeah, again, it's looking for a variety of sources to corroborate the information.
It's actually, okay, so I have a lot of follow-up questions. People also asked, you mentioned, can you expand about how those are different? So people also asked, just to explain in case anybody is not sure what that section is, if you do this search on Google, you will probably see this like accordion style section that ranks. And usually it's pretty high up, and it'll normally list like related questions to best AC repair company in Tampa. And I heard you say that those are not as good as this. So what, because you're right, a lot of SEOs follow those. How are they different?
Right. So there can be overlap from it because, of course, Google's going to learn from historical searches. Like there's a variety of ways that they are generating these fan outs. But my point is that don't limit yourself to just people also ask. Like that is not all that's being used here. And, there's been like some, excuse me, criticism of this approach because it's like, oh, well, you're just getting it from the model. That's not real data. Another approach that we take, and we have another version of this tool that we're going to be releasing really soon, is to take all the citations for the AI overview and then do a reverse intersect on what those pages rank for. So then that way you have more quote unquote real data. You get a sense of what are these pages actually ranking for that you want to target as well. And then that way you just have a combination of all of the data points that are likely being used, so you have as much coverage as possible.
That's killer. Okay. So then the other question I had is, obviously you can rank for these queries with your own website, right? You can have the same website rank for every single one of these queries. Let's say you've done that, you're in position 5 for all of them or higher. What is better, having your site rank or having like a Reddit thread rank for one of these that mentions you, or a Medium article, or a news article or listicle that's like, here's the top 10 best blah 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 in Tampa? What's better, or are you aiming to do both?
You want it all, because again, these systems are looking for consensus from authoritative sources. They're also looking for like, is there an authoritative source that's saying something net new that no one else is? But they're primarily looking for consensus. So if, let's say, your business is called like, ABC, AC repair or whatever it is, if you appear on a variety of different sources and it says that this is the best company, that's going to be much stronger than if just your website says it. So I keep telling people that you've got to take like Omni-Media approach to this. Like ideally you would have a YouTube video, you'd have a good thread on Reddit, you'd have earned media via like PR and things like that. The more spaces that are saying that you are great, or the more spaces that are reinforcing whatever your message is, the more likely you are going to appear in the AI overview or in Gemini or ChatGPT or any of these tools.
And I would think that Google would trust a site like Reddit saying you're the best over you saying you're the best. Theoretically, maybe, I don't know.
Which is weird because Reddit is a cesspool, but okay.
It really is. So I have mixed feelings about Reddit. Reddit is both good and bad. I think there are parts of Reddit that are not very well moderated, where stuff hides, and certainly is a cesspool. I mean, the amount of threads that get taken down in communities I'm in it's wild. Like it has grown exponentially in the last couple of years now that people realize Reddit matters. So it's a lot more work for moderators, that's for sure. Here's another example I'll have you do. Let's do personal injury lawyer, and let's do Nashville. I'm just picking a city.
Nashville. Let's see what we get.
I might get you to do a near me one just because I'm actually curious to see what it would pull out, since it doesn't, like, wouldn't know where you are.
Yeah, the tool doesn't do anything location based. Like it doesn't inherently tell the model your location. We could make it do that, but it doesn't.
Okay. Somebody was asking for the link for the tool. So Carrie, can I make sure that gets like pinned in the chat or something? I can see that could get lost. But let's make sure that people have that. Yeah, and you said AI mode basically works the same. It just comes up with more queries, right? Now,
Exactly.
you alluded to ChatGPT being different. Is it safe to say, if you use this list, that should theoretically help you on ChatGPT?
So yeah, there's a lot of overlap, but with ChatGPT, you could have the same query and it might just like reword it. So we were just doing some keyword research for one of our clients, and we use Profound. And so with ChatGPT, you can actually see what the fan out queries are in like the network response. So the tools that give you that are basically pulling it directly from ChatGPT. The thing is this, like the query could be fundamentally the same in what it's asking, but they may reword it, and that happens a lot. So, for one of our clients, we pulled all the data for the last 3 months, and it was something like over 100,000 different queries that were run for the same prompts that the users might use. There tends to be a lot of overlap between what you get from Google, but there also tends to be a lot of like random queries that you don't get from Google as well.
Got it. Okay. Nashville slip and fall attorney. I want to ask you about that. So I work with a lot of personal injury attorneys. So I can tell you right now, if you have a brand new personal injury attorney and you were to put up a page targeting that keyword, good luck getting that thing indexed. Like you might get it indexed, but there are so many of these that already exist and they're all the same crap. It's all the same page, right? Every personal injury lawyer in Tennessee probably has one of these. So what would you suggest in instances like that, where you have queries that are just so oversaturated, like your chances of ranking for them are very low?
Yeah,
Without
I'd probably use different formats instead. Like I'd probably start with a video if there's not that many videos in the space. I'd probably post on, like do your basic parasitic SEO, post on sites like Medium and Quora and things like that. So I probably focus on outside of my site rather than on my site.
Okay, good. I'll expand on that later. If you scroll over to show the formats, this is, you said the tool also shows you. So for some of these, it wants, okay, so interesting. The one that says map local pack, it says that like that means it wants a business profile for that query.
Yep.
Okay. And checklist, when it says something like that, does it matter how you format it? Like, do you want an ordered list, an unordered list? Like, does stuff, that kind of nitty-gritty detail matter?
Yeah, I don't think the ordered list versus unordered list makes a difference. I haven't seen anything like that. I mean, I'm sure someone can do a correlation study and get more definitive information, but I haven't seen there be a difference between those two things.
Okay. Carrie has an interesting question. This is something we've been talking about a lot recently. Have you heard of Avalanche Theory? It's a term that I don't know if every SEO is familiar with.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
So it's a theory that Kyle Roof talks about a lot. So I think he talked about it when I interviewed him a few months ago. And this guy named Chris Carter was the one to kind of name it. But essentially, it's this concept that when you are a newer website, a newer business, that you have like no authority. So you actually need to target keywords that are in your tier. So like using this example, new personal injury lawyer in Nashville, targeting Nashville car accident lawyer, like good luck. Like you're not going to get that keyword, right? You're not going to rank for that keyword, but you might rank for what qualifies as a personal injury case in Tennessee. That's less competitive, less people going after it. So they actually tell you to essentially target keywords that have almost no search volume when you're first starting out. And then once you gain and they have a whole formula for it, but once you gain a certain amount of authority, then you will start ranking for the bigger things and you can start targeting those things next and then moving your way up. That's kind of the concept. Would you say that that still works with AI?
Oh yeah, it works even better with AI because it's more about the relevance than some of the other factors like link equity and things like that. One thing I would kind of challenge this theory though a little bit, and I'm not saying what they're saying isn't true, but what also happens is that when a new site pops up, Google applies a similar quality score to it to sites that look like it. So initially, you'll see a lot of performance for that until they collect enough user signals to then figure out where that site should perform. So you see this a lot with migrations, right? Like when you've migrated to a new domain and the first month it just performs really well and then it might drop off and normalize at a different stage. Because what happens is Google is like, oh, okay, well, we've seen content that looks like this, sites that look like this, and they typically perform here. Let's boost it for a while, collect the user signals, and then say, okay, well, a lot of users are bouncing, so it actually should perform here. So I think what they're describing is true when you talk about, especially local sites where there's not much to it. But if instead you launch your site with like a lot of content and that content looks similar to like sites that perform, as long as you can maintain those user signals, meaning that users that click through actually stay on your site, you will likely perform a lot faster.
Now, I know in SEO, we've had it preached at us that we need to have unique stuff, right? Something that's different,
Mhm.
something that Google doesn't already have. And I actually say this all the time to people. I'm like, if you just regurgitate the same stuff over and over again, you will run into issues getting your pages to get indexed and then rank anywhere. But this shift is a little different because now it's like, well, you also need to have consensus. You don't want to be like disagreeing with everybody in your space. How do you balance that?
Yeah, and also what I mentioned was that they're looking for authoritative sources that are saying net new information. So like, if everyone says the color of the earth is green
Mhm.
and you say that it's purple, like of course they're gonna be like, okay, well, ignore that. But if you also say like the density of the earth is X and you seem to be um, an authority in the space on geology or whatever, because that's all you talk about, they are going to use that density of the earth figure from you because no one else is saying it. So it's really about surveying the information space and making sure that you're not contradicting things that are just facts. And also finding spaces where you can say unique things. So really, it's like it's rewarding thought leadership to some degree.
Got it. I have some questions here that I want to take from the audience. They're asking if this works for US queries or does it work for like any country?
It works for any country. I don't know that we, excuse me, let me clarify. There is nothing in here where it's like you toggle it for a different country, but there's also nothing limiting that, right? Like, so if you were to give it different languages or to add query qualifiers for different locations, it should work the same.
Okay. What are your thoughts on LLMs.txt files?
Complete waste of time.
I figured that would be a short answer. All right. Someone is also asking how to get a Gemini API key. Is it difficult?
No, it's real easy. Just go to aistudio.google.com and and grab it from there. Um, and the Gemini key you can get through there is a free one unless you enable billing. So you don't have to worry about like, overrunning or anything. But once you do enable billing, then you definitely want to make sure that you are monitoring that.
This is a really good question. This is something I hear a lot. How do you find AIOs are more likely to trigger for transactional versus informational queries? Are they triggering equally for both?
No.
What are your thoughts on that? What have you seen?
Yeah, it's definitely not equally for both. I see more transactional queries have less AIOs than informational, but at this point, it's pretty much like almost every query I see informational that triggers them. And so, in the newer version of Qforia, one of the things that we do is see whether or not the query actually requires grounding, meaning do they need to go to the web and pull sources? And again, more often than not, the query does trigger grounding, but it's something that you should review before you even go through the process of looking at the query fanouts. Because if they're not using it, they're not doing grounding. There's no reason for you to do the whole query fanout.
Okay, this user wants to know what would you say drives relevance?
So relevance is a very specific thing. I think for many years in the SEO space, we think of it as like a qualitative idea. Like I read your page and I feel like mine is more relevant than yours. That's not how it works. It's a mathematical idea. So the way that relevance is calculated is queries or prompts and documents are plotted in multidimensional space. And so the prompts or queries, or let me say this again, the documents that are physically closest in that multidimensional space to the prompt or query are considered the most relevant. So that's measured. I look like Idris Elba. That's funny. That's measured by distance measures. So there is Cosine Similarity, which is the most popular. There's also dot product. These are all basically like linear algebra concepts that are just measuring the distance between angles. And so the way that impacts what you actually do is the more that you're using entities, the more that you're using the expected language, the more that you are using what are called semantic triples, the more relevant the content is going to appear in these environments.
Now, you mentioned semantic triples. I do want to get you to define that. That's again a phrase that I hear a lot recently, but I think there might be some people that don't know what that means.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So it's just the atomic measurement of the subject, predicate, and object in a sentence. So think about structured data, right? In structured data, you are saying a thing is a thing. So like, your business is named this, right? Like that's a representation of a semantic triple. So you're basically saying like an object has an attribute. So whenever you write something like that, write a sentence in that way, it's something that a language model or a search engine can extract and understand the relationships between it. So when we talk about structured data, again, it isn't just like schema. It's also just being the ability to extract information from text content.
So if you were a divorce lawyer in Nashville, what would be an example of a semantic triple? Like it's three things. What are the three things?
Yeah, so like let's say your firm is called
Mike King Law Firm.
Sure. Mike King Personal Injury Attorneys, right? So the subject is me, Mike King Personal Injury Attorneys. Like that is the subject or the entity in this case. And then the predicate is, whatever the relationship is between that entity and whatever the thing is. So if you say that, Mike King Personal Injury Attorneys is the best lawyers in New York. Best lawyers in New York is the object, effectively. So when you write that as a sentence, a large language model or a search engine can look at that sentence and understand there's a relationship between that law firm and what they do and how they do it. So all of those sentences are understood through natural language processing by decomposing all that into a series of subjects and objects, and then being able to map the relationships at scale across the web and also across your site.
One thing that we are seeing with clients is that a lot of businesses don't refer to themselves by name on their website, right? Like you might not say like at Mike King Personal Injury Lawyers, blah, blah, blah. Like you might just say we. And
Sure.
We're seeing that like definitely if you want to control like how things look, it is better to actually refer to yourself by name on your website. Like it's a small thing, but a lot of small businesses don't do it. Like they don't actually refer to themselves by name on their website in their text.
Yeah. And you don't have to like explicitly do it every time in every sentence, right? Like, the large language models are really good at this stage that they can understand when you're using pronouns and what they're referencing and things like that. There's a concept called co-reference where they can understand like when two things are mentioned together, or if you always are mentioning three things together, but you don't mention one of them, implicitly you're referring to all three when you talk about the other two. So things are pretty sophisticated in that you don't have to write like it's 2006 where you have to like say your name in every sentence over and over and do keyword stuffing.
I don't know. The people on Reddit, they might disagree with you because I'm telling you, all the posts I see, it's like Sterling Sky, we offer blah, blah, blah. And they're like, you can see they so specifically put their business name in there. Like it's very obvious. When you're seeing these threads. I think they assume it works, doing it like that on Reddit.
I mean, there's some people that bold their text and use italics and so on for SEO, and they swear by that. So
Ryan Jones has a follow-up question. He wants to know about AI.txt.
Ryan Jones, I've never heard of that guy. Sorry.
Who's that guy? We'll ignore him. All right. You want to answer him?
Yeah, I mean, there are quote unquote competing protocols that people are trying to bring, but like what matters is adoption, right? Like Anthropic, I think were the first people to talk about LLMs.txt. As far as I know, they're the only ones that officially support it, which of course they would. It's their protocol. But think about Robots.txt, right? Like that was a protocol that wasn't completely official for a long time, but it had a lot of adoption. And so we kind of, just talked about it being real or whatever. So the point is like just go to where things are actually being adopted. Don't like whatever the conversation is around it, it doesn't matter. Like what are these systems actually using?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, there's a lot more questions. Okay, I'm going to try to get through them all. Before I do, I just want to mention for people that have not yet registered for our event coming up in a couple weeks, we have an event coming up that we are going to be doing. We call it LocalU Global. We have a lot of really amazing speakers that are going to be presenting, like Will Reynolds and Kyle Roof and Dana DiTomaso and a whole bunch of other ones. So I'm pretty stoked about this event. It is virtual. We did it this way so that it would appeal to our audience overseas. And it's only $135. If you have not got your ticket yet for that, do make sure to do so quickly so that they don't run out as it's coming up soon. And Mike, maybe this is a good time to mention too, like have you started promoting your event yet or no? Should I mention
Oh
it?
yeah, of course. SEO
Okay.
week.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, SEO week. It's the end of April. You should definitely come. Greatest
Yeah.
SEO conference ever.
If you're looking for an in-person event, it's in New York City, right?
It is in New York City. You can check it out at seoweek.org for all the information. And last year we had Busta Rhymes at our after party. So who knows who
Oh
we'll
my
get this year?
goodness. Yeah, because you're going to the Grammys. You're gonna pick somebody up there and bring them back.
I am indeed going to the Grammys.
That's insane. More on that later. Let's go back to these SEO questions, or maybe I should call them geo questions. Would it still make sense to have typical service pages and pages that are using unique phrases on the back end of the site?
Um, Not linked to from any place but the sitemap? Is that what they're saying?
I don't think so. I think this is more like questions around, adding. Some people will say blogging is dead and you shouldn't be pushing out content because your content doesn't get much traffic. Which, in fairness, there's some truth to that. Blogging content has shrunk a lot, like the amount of traffic that it drives. So I think that's what they're getting at here. I believe. Like, is it still worthwhile to publish content in that format?
I would say yeah, because again, like these systems are just looking for food. They're looking to go out there and get as much information as possible. So the more that you can provide them, the better.
All right. Jeff wants to know, what is the best way to know if Google is grounding or not for a specific query?
Yeah, the best way to do it is to use the Gemini API. They have a Google search function where it basically decides whether or not to go out to Google search and get information. And so you basically just ask it the query with that enabled and see what it does.
Now, I know we have a lot of like SEO nerds here who understand that concept, but I think it might be better to just break it down for those who are like, can you explain the significance of grounding? Why does that matter?
Yeah, so a large language model can attempt to answer your question without going to get any other sources. Of course, it's been trained on, as much of the internet that it can get its hands on. But the concept of what's called retrieval augmented generation is when you're combining a search engine with a large language model. And so it makes a decision of whether or not it needs to go to the search engine and then get more information to answer that question. Like if it doesn't feel confident in the answer it would generate from just a large language model, it then goes to Google search and then performs a bunch of searches. So that concept is called grounding in the Google environment.
Got it. Appreciate that. All right, with AI overviews showing up a lot of informational queries, do you think it's worth? Oh, we just answered this question. Do you think it's worth targeting for blog posts? So Mike sounds like he is pro blogging at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, that being said, are you as an agency, like with the services and the things that you provide for clients, are you diversifying that a lot more? Like, I mean, I think 10 years ago we were all like content, like words on a page. Do you think that it's important for businesses to start investing in things like video more than like last year?
Absolutely. So at IPO Rank, we have a whole creative team. Like we do video, we do all sorts of content for that reason. Or no, it's not that reason. Like we do it because we want to, but like the way that we get clients to buy into it is through a function of the fact that AI is multimodal. And so they are pulling in video, they are pulling in audio, things like that. So yeah, I definitely think it's worth doubling down on that for anyone who's trying to get more visibility here.
Awesome. Would you write the same content that your competition has?
Like
And then,
generally,
well,
yeah.
and then there's a follow-up question. Do you use has, is, does format? Would it perform better for AIO? So it's kind of two questions.
Yeah. So these systems are looking for the question and answer model of content. Like that just performs best in these environments. And that's why you're seeing so many of these like classic SEO tactics come back. Like headings matter a lot in these systems. And in fact, with the different chunks or the different passages on your page, some of these systems will have the heading structure, the heading hierarchy that preceded it get added to the chunk. So let's say the passage is like below an H3. It's going to take the H1 and H2 and add it to that passage and then feed that to the language model to figure out like, does this make the most sense? So yeah, like if the more structured you make your content where like heading is the question and then you have a very tight, succinct answer in the paragraph below it, the better things are going to perform.
Yeah, 100%. We have seen that across the board. Now, Mike, correct me here. Do you have any clients that are in the local SEO sphere, or are your clients mostly like SaaS and e-commerce and things like that?
We have some locals, but like for us, it's more the big companies that have a bunch of locations rather than, like plumbers and things like that. And we've done, obviously we have humble beginnings. We've done a lot of that stuff in the past, but right now it's mostly, just companies that have hundreds of locations.
And for those locations, is there anything specific that they need to be considering that maybe doesn't apply to like a SaaS company?
I mean, again, it kind of goes back to things that you have already been doing, which is like location pages that have very specific information about that location, service area pages, things like that. That's what we see make a difference there, because everything else is just like what everyone else is doing, right? Like you have your general content, your blog content, so on and so forth. But what I've seen really move the needle is the location pages and the service pages that are like as bespoke as you can make them for those areas.
Yeah, we actually are seeing for our clients, the pages that are getting the most traffic from ChatGPT are location pages or service area pages, either or. This is a good question. How do the systems interpret infographics and video content? Do they rely on alt data, or like how are they digesting that?
So they can, using computer vision, they can actually look at that content. Like the same way that if you give an image to ChatGPT or Gemini, you say like, "Hey, tell me what's in this," or transcribe all the words from the text and so on. They can read it in that way. And so the whole thinking where it's like, "Oh, well, with images, only alt tags matter," I think that's been dead for a while, actually. And then with video, specifically in the Google environment, they're not just like transcribing it and then using the transcript. They can actually watch the video. So if you upload a video to Gemini, like it can really understand everything in the video. Whereas with ChatGPT, they don't have like an index. So they don't have an index of the videos. They're not able to treat the videos in the same way that Google does. They can transcribe it, but they can't really see it as well.
This is a great question from Tim. Do you have any data or metrics relating to the success of this? Like we've been talking a lot about like, the query fan out strategy. What have you seen as far as like you go and implement using that for your content, fueling it? What was the outcome?
Yeah, I think we have a couple case studies on our website, but like, one of our clients is like a 661% increase in visibility across all the different AI platforms. I think it was like 253% increase for AI overviews. I don't know, just go to our site, like it's all there. But we get great results from doing this. And there's a lot of like questions in the space of what to do. I think that's the only place that we really have control in these AI environments is identifying these synthetic queries and then improving our rankings for those synthetic queries. Yes, you can do all the technical things and make sure that your content is accessible because, like a ChatGPT doesn't render pages and things like that. But it's largely about, creating more instances of opportunities for you to feed the model. Because the way I look at it is it's like a raffle, and you want to have as many raffle tickets as possible, because once it gets into synthesis, you have no control over what the model is going to do. But if they see you over and over and over across all the data that they looked at, you have a higher likelihood of being the source and also the citation.
Now, you mentioned some numbers, so I have to ask a follow-up question. How on earth are you measuring this stuff? Because that is something that I've heard very mixed opinions on.
Sure. So the way we think about measurement is we're bucketing things in the three stratifications, I guess. You have your performance measures, which is what you've always been looking at, like what does the referral traffic do once it comes to your site? Then you have the channel metrics, so it's like share of voice, citation rate, things like that. And then you have the input metrics, the things that you can actually impact. So that's going to be things like your passage relevance scores. It's going to be your rankings for synthetic queries. It'll be, how often are the bots visiting your content, because a lot of these systems are pulling in real time. Google doesn't necessarily because they've got the index, but ChatGPT is definitely pulling in real time. So the measures that I just talked to you about is like the visibility measures in those channels as a result of the things that we did from those input metrics. But on the performance side, you shouldn't expect to see like a ton of traffic come from these channels, because that's just not really how they work. They're more branding channels than they are performance channels.
So rankings, you mentioned rankings. I have tried a few tools to try and measure rankings. So far, none seem to be very reliable. I've heard most people say rankings in AI is like garbage. Like there's no such thing as ranking in AI. So you mentioned rankings. So is there a tool that you suggest that actually is capable of getting anything accurate?
Yeah. So with rankings, specifically talking about the rankings of the synthetic queries. As far as like share of voice and all that in those channels, I agree. There are definitely problems there, right? Like, and as I understand it, we use Profound, but as I understand it, with what they do is they're going to run those prompts multiple times, and then they're going to average it to see who's performing best. And that does make more sense to me, right? Like I know a lot of these platforms are doing a variety of different things. Like some are pulling from the APIs, which is going to be different from what you're going to get from the interfaces. Some are scraping, which makes more sense for what users are actually seeing. Some are just doing one pull a day and being like, cool, that's where you rank, which again doesn't make sense because these are probabilistic environments. So it makes a lot more sense to me that, if someone is pulling those results multiple times a day and then averaging in them to say, okay, here's where you perform. That's not any different from the average position that you get in Google Search Console. And I think, people are kind of missing out on that idea. Like the concept of ranking even in classic search doesn't really make sense, because the way that's done is you're effectively like spinning up an instance of, a client, whether that's like a headless browser or not. It's got to be headless at this point because everything is using JavaScript. And it's as though the first thing that computer ever did was perform your search. So you're trying to like get around the idea of personalization or whatever, but every single person has personalization to some degree. So yes, it's a much bigger problem for AI search, but it was already a problem that we were ignoring because we're trying to act like 2003 where there was no personalization.
So I'm going to pull up a thing you shared on X recently, and it was a quote that you took from an article that talked about a 500 token limit on chunk size.
Mhm.
Also, like, who came up with the word chunk? Like, can somebody rename that? I just hate saying that. It's terrible. Like, anyways, 500 token chunk size. We need to rename that. Mike, we got to rename that. I'm going to task you with that. What is significant about this? What is the practical takeaway here for a business owner?
So it just shows that there's a limit in the amount of copy that's being fed as a passage. And so what that kind of tells you is that the shorter you make your paragraphs, the better, because you want it to cover as much information in that block before they like chop it up or move to another section. So let's say you have a long paragraph. Let's say it's like 1,000-word paragraph for whatever reason. If they chunk that in the middle and there's a data point on one side that actually applies to the rest of the sentence, then they may miss out on that because of it. So it really just speaks to the idea of you want to have, complete thoughts in small spaces.
Got it. And what are your thoughts on, like, so years ago, several SEOs made the 10x content popular idea. Like, I think Brian Dean talked a lot about it in the skyscraper technique and all this stuff, where you want this like giant page that has 10 times the content of everybody else. Would that still work as long as you have concise headers and paragraphs, or are we entering a day where it's better to have like 10 articles?
It works both ways. So specifically in the Google environment, there's a few years back, there was an article about what they call passage indexing. That's what this is, right? Like that's when they move to be able to understand like the components of pages rather than just thinking about the page broadly. And so what that told us is that you can have a lot of information on a page and they can understand like this section of the page is about XYZ things, and they could use that even though the whole page is about a variety of things. So you can take either approach where it's like 10 pages on the subject and you have like a whole topic cluster, or you have one really long page that's about everything. Both approaches have pros and cons.
Got it. All right. There were a couple questions that came in about Google Business Profiles. I'm not going to ask Mike about that. I'm actually going to save those. Make sure you come back next month, because next month we're doing that topic. I'll be sitting down with Ben Fisher, and we're specifically going to be talking about like policies, like Google policies. So things that Google is actually punishing, because there's a lot of policies that Google doesn't enforce. We're going to be kind of focusing on the ones that they actually are enforcing, and talking about some of the worst cases Ben has seen where businesses got really screwed for being caught essentially violating Google's guidelines. So register for that for your business GBP questions. This is a really good question here, because I have a lot of thoughts on this too, but there are a lot of people in local SEO that use EMDs for a domain name. Okay. So let's say, for example, you are a garage door repair company and your name is Garage Door Repair Dallas. Like, kid you not, there's a lot of small businesses that do this. Does this now hurt you with things like semantic triples, because you're actually taking something that's not a brand and trying to make it a brand, which can be a very confusing signal?
You mean in the copy or just in the domain?
No, like there are businesses that are named these things.
Got you. So like, the Thai restaurant near me type.
Literally,
business.
like there's so many of these. I can't tell you how common this is, because in defense of the strategy, it does work. I actually have seen, I remember having this conversation with a tree service business years ago. Let's say their business name is literally like Dallas Tree Service. Like that is their name. And I'm like, oh, like it's good, but it's bad because you have no knowledge panel. When you search it, you get like 3 businesses because Google thinks it's a generic search. So now with this whole evolution, is that even more of a bad idea than it was before?
Yeah, because the entities are going to be used in this environment as well. So specifically in the Google environment, if it's not represented as an entity, there's no knowledge panel, you're not going to get the value in the same way if you're saying over and over and over, we're a Thai restaurant near me or dentist near me, in your copy. So I agree. That's not going to be working really well.
There's so many caveats to this. The not having a knowledge panel is one. There is another one, actually. We have a few clients actually that fall into this bucket. And I always tell people, like, you need a unique identifier. Like, you can be Dallas Tree Service as long as you're Joy Hawkins Dallas Tree Service, something. And we have one right now that's actually dealing with a Google Ads dispute because somebody's bidding on their brand name, but Google doesn't see it as a brand name. Google sees it as a generic query. And I'm like, I kind of get it. Like, this is the problem with that business model, unfortunately. Miles wants to know, okay, predictions, put on your magician hat here. What would be your prediction or your expectation this year for Google search when it comes to all of this, Google AI?
Yeah, personalization on Google is going to they're going to turn the dial up a whole lot more. Like, so in the same way that, like we're talking about, ChatGPT can have very different responses for every user. I think Google's going to go way more in that direction. So the idea of there being a SERP that we can do rank tracking on isn't really going to make sense at all. They're going to very much like leverage that personal context, as they call it, as the filtering mechanism for everything across Google.
This is maybe not a good time to own a rank tracker company. I don't know. I don't know. There's lots of other ways to measure they're useful, though. What do you think about rounding page with all the important basic information from machine readable form? I don't know if I read that correctly.
So I'm not sure. I think I can answer the question without being sure what the question is. And what I mean by that is there are people that are having success by using quote unquote double serving or cloaking, if you will, in the LLM environments. Definitely don't recommend it at all for Google or whatever, but there's a lot of people that are doing things like serving markdown versions of their pages to large language models and including additional information like this. So as an example, like, my company does this and it was founded in this space and whatever, having that like very clearly written in markdown does seem to have an impact. But you could also do that by just providing that information on your pages as well.
Yeah, I've seen some kind of black hat-ish strategies that haven't worked in a lot of years work very well with AI. Not to clarify, I have not done these. I've heard about them from people who
Well, they're not necessarily black hat when you're talking about ChatGPT. So let's be clear, because black hat is a term which comes from hacking that Google kind of co-opted. It's not black hat, it's just against Google's guidelines. And ChatGPT doesn't have any guidelines, so it's not black hat.
Hey, I like that approach. That's actually a good way to look at it. All right, I think I actually already asked you this one. Different approach. Do you have any different approach with the way that you structure this for a single location business versus a multi-location business?
Yeah, I mean, we really just let the query fan out kind of drive it. So, if we're seeing across the query set that we're looking at, that more like there's a different subset of queries that pop up for different locations, then that's going to inform like what the content strategy is going to be. But otherwise, it's pretty much the same.
Okay. Can a query go from being ungrounded to grounded, or vice versa, maybe?
So I've seen it, but not a lot. I think that especially in the case of ChatGPT, what I've seen is that they start to cache things if you run that same query over and over, and so it stops doing the fan out. But I would definitely err on the side of using the fan out if you've seen it, rather than like assuming it's not there.
Here's the burning question in the room. Are there truly any new tactics when it comes to work, like optimizing for geo or AI?
I think it's the wrong question, because you can use the same tactics and use a different strategy. So as an example, right, like historically, you might want to not have a pricing page for whatever reason in SEO or just marketing in general. But now, if you don't have a pricing page, and it's going to be third parties that are answering all your pricing queries. So yes, the tactics will be the same, but the strategy will be different. And also the tactics won't be the same for forever, because there are going to be more and more components added to AI that require new tactics. So as an example, you can like make an app that is part of ChatGPT. So as an example, Zillow has one. Doing that is not the same tactics as SEO. That is building a product. So there's going to be a lot of things that evolve, and I think that people that keep saying things like, "Oh, well, it's the same tactics, it's the same thing," are just going to put themselves in a box where they're going to be doing AI work for like $1,000 a month. And to those people, I wish the best of luck.
That's a nice way to put it. How do you avoid cannibalization when you're answering so many similar queries?
I don't think you do. I think cannibalization is kind of like a part of this, right? But
Mm.
what I would say is look for other places you can put that information so you're not cannibalizing it on your own site, right? Like if it's a situation where it could be a Quora thread or a Reddit thread or a Medium post, like those are good ways to do that. And then also cannibalization, I think people kind of look at it in a way that's absolute, and it's not. So you can have two pages that have the exact same content, and the only thing that's different is like, the location. And I think we've all seen this where it'll perform just as well for that other location, even though it is otherwise duplicate content. So I don't think that it's as big of a deal as we're making it out to be.
Oh man, I have some good tests in the queue on that regarding the concept of duplicate content that I'm hoping I'll have ready for our March webinar. But it's going to be a good one because yeah, I disagree with I think consensus on that, and I think that those pages are fine and you don't need to stress about them.
Yep.
What would you do with a client that you're just starting on? Let's say you want to improve their LLM presence. They have 1,500 pages and 2,000 blog posts.
Um, So I would say, again, start with the query fan out and then also take a look at what the gaps are in the content, like what is being expected, and then just kind of optimize that existing content because it's going to serve both purposes. Because, at the end of the day, LLMs and search engines operate on the same technology. So the improvements that you make for organic search will also improve your LLM stuff, but there's just kind of a limit of how far you can go with just doing classic SEO work. Because again, if you're just like, hey, here's my target keyword, I just optimize for the target keyword and don't think about these synthetic queries at all, you're not going to get as much visibility as if you take the approach of looking at those matrix of queries and then making adjustments according to that.
Yeah, good answer. Now, you mentioned a couple tools. I don't know if there's any others you want to mention. People are always asking what tools you kind of work with to measure performance. So I think you mentioned Profound. Obviously, you've got your own internal one, and you've got this public one as well. Anything else that helps when it comes to measuring?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of tools out there, right? Like I said, I prefer Profound. I think they're the best, but there's also things like Athena and Peak, and there's a variety of other tools that are effectively copying what Profound started with. And I think some of the content optimization tools out there, particularly there's a company called Market Brew. They have this tool called Content Booster, which is my favorite content optimization tool. It kind of maps to things that we do internally. But what they implicitly do is identify the query fan out queries, and then they look at your content and say, okay, where are the semantic gaps? And then they will use a large language model to fulfill them for you. So I don't know, a lot of people know about that one, but I would recommend checking that one out.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll make sure Noah looks at that one. He builds our internal tools that we use, and I'm always like, what's the best ideas out there? Passage relevance score. Where do you get that?
Yeah, we calculate that ourselves. So the way that it works is you've got to basically create vector embeddings of the queries, vector embeddings of the passages, and then you do the comparisons to get that cosine similarity or dot product or whatever it is. The new version of Qforia has that built into it. It's a tool called Chunk Daily. Also, I think Ryan Jones's tool, not Ryan Jones from the UK or Ryan Jones from Profound, but Ryan Jones one that's in here. He has a tool called SERP Recon. I think they're also doing similar stuff to that. But yeah, my intention at SEO Week this year is to drop a ton of open source tools that are filling the gaps that I'm seeing in a lot of the tooling that we have in our space. So anything that I mentioned, that if there isn't something that exists, you should expect that we're going to put out something free very soon.
Oh, that's exciting. Ryan Jones has a branding problem. I think you need a middle initial. As I mentioned, Noah, I will take his question. Are you, oh my gosh, of course he asked like the most nerdy question. Are you recursively looping through fan outs to build a topical map? Like nobody can understand what you're talking about, Noah.
I know what he means. We don't do a visualization like that, but we should, and I think we will.
Oh my god. All right. Well, nerd to nerd here. This question here, I don't know if you've seen these, Mike. I've been kind of obsessing about them recently, but there are these things we're calling AI local packs. They're essentially local packs, but they are driven by Google's AI, and they only show up on mobile, and they're showing up for about 8% of queries in the United States only. I've never seen them in any other countries. So we're seeing a lot of these. They're a little scary because they are very different than what we are used to with the local pack. Have you seen these yet? Like, do you know what I'm referring to?
I have not.
I was over in the UK in early December, and everyone over there was like, what are you talking about? Because they're not over there yet. So these things are a little terrifying. I do have a blog that I just published about them in a video, actually from December, where I sat down with Darren Shaw and Luke, and we talked about this. But I'll say that no, I do not think that Google business profiles are dead, but they certainly are shrinking. Like the volume you will get out of a high ranking Google business profile is significantly less at the end of last year compared to the beginning of last year. We have a chart that shows it. It's like, so it is dropping. It's not dead. It's still one of the highest lead sources for the majority of businesses that we work with. But that is a little bit of a scary trend. I'm not going to lie. That is a big deal to most business owners. So
I mean, to be fair, that's what we're seeing across organic in general. So it's not shocking.
Yeah. The rest of the world probably does not feel sorry for us in local SEO because they've already been hit with this, with the helpful content update and like a bunch of other things that didn't really touch local SEO. So yeah, we're a little behind. Well, Mike, I really want to be mindful of your time here. I appreciate you taking an hour to talk to us. Where can people find you if they have questions or want to connect with you after?
Yeah, iPowerrank.com. I'm iPowerrank on all the social channels. Don't talk to me on Instagram because we're not talking about SEO there. But other than that, yeah, just holler at me or Mike at iPowerrank.com for email.
And if you want to see him in person, you got to check out his conference in New York City.
Yep.
There you go. All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.